Hedy, welcome to the podcast. Hedy Wong is a seasoned Wall Street veteran and the founder of Blockstreet, the first unified liquidity layer for tokenized assets backed by Tier 1 venture firms. Before launching Blockstreet, she managed portfolios at Point72 Cubist, where she specialized in alpha design, execution models, and scalable trading infrastructure. She also held senior roles at Capital One, helping build its flagship credit card product and the core credit risk engines behind it. Yudi studied at Harvard and worked closely with faculty across Harvard Business School, Stanford Engineering, and the National Bureau of Economic Research. All right, Heidi. So, first and foremost, were you always curious in business? I mean, how were you as a high school student?
Yeah, I was always like I guess the bad student, like in terms of I always joined a couple of student clubs, social clubs I grew up in like Asia, so our social club in case of that is like debate clubs. And also I
Okay.
joined, I remember like Model United Nations, those sort of networking and, practice on, business and both about like how you understand the world in general. Yeah.
Very cool. So before we talk about crypto, I want to know, it sounds like your foundation was traditional finance.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, why weren't you happy there? Why did you transition into this wonky world of Web3?
Yeah, I like the question because even when long story short, the quick story is like I had a couple of friends that I live in New York City. New York has some sort of veterans in Web3 as well. So I was running into the social events, networking events, and I starting to chat with founders, startup, and investors about the space. And that drove my curiosities around doing my own research. And eventually, probably like we mentioned at the beginning, I thought Web3 or crypto is a space that is a lot like complex, and it's a kind of like non-compliant and out of the world sort of. But when I actually starting to build my startup and also starting to become a contributor into the industry, I realized this is a really beautiful space. And I think to thinking back, right, I feel like this is what's kind of like calling to me that lead me towards this, where I feel like for TriFi, I wouldn't necessarily say it's boring, right? But it's an area where you have so many people already built so many blocks. And for me, literally, I just feel like I'm moving the blocks. I'm not really building something that new or something like contributing or significant there. I can become like a legacy for my future um kids or my generation, etc. Yeah.
Yeah. It feels like the 100K milestone for Bitcoin was more of a crossing of the Rubicon, right? Where even like the Overton window of conversation of like, hey, is Bitcoin purely a speculative asset? Even like the conversation of, hey, it's dead, it's going to zero every time we hit a bit of a bear market. That conversation kind of died out. And then you see what's unique about, this cycle is that you're seeing mass adoption by banks and traditional finance system. And you're seeing, the fact that you mentioned it yourself, like there's a lack of regulation, a lack of clarity. That was almost intrinsically that way by design to stifle this idea of cryptocurrency. And now you're seeing a very pro crypto administration in the United States. You're seeing the SEC finally provide clarity. And one of the big conversations, aside for stablecoins, is tokenization. And it's like a bridge between the traditional world and the this crazy world of Web3 today. So tell me a little bit about tokenization and how that's going to change traditional equity markets in that we have currently.
100%. I think it changed about how people think about asset classes and how people think about investment cycles. And then it also changed about ownerships fundamentally. Like what does it mean by owning an asset versus you become a distributor and you become operational players in the space. That's a high level summary. But I think what it's more fundamentally significantly impactful for the society, it's because tokenization really changed our connection, like you mentioned, digital world to real world. Because traditionally, every investment or every things that you purchase, it has to be having some sort of concrete existence, like a bank account. that depends on counterparty or third party. But I think tokenization sort of changed that in terms of you can become your own custodian, and then the asset class you own can also be fractional, and it could improve the liquidity, and it also could improve how people can own much more and much more diversified across geographic, across asset classes, and across obviously different issuers. Where traditionally, usually you're locked in a geographical asset class or financial market, and you're locked in into a physical constraint on what you can actually own in terms of the house, in terms of the goods, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's almost like this archaic structure from 9:30 to 4 Monday through Friday. And you have this like bombshell news that comes Friday at 4 p.m. And it's always like crypto that gets the worst of it because all the, equity markets are
Yeah.
closed. And, a part of moving this, to the web world is it's going to solve one of those biggest problems where there's just, you're able to engage with the market whenever you like. Is that one of yeah, it's one of the perks there. So let me ask you this, take a bit of a macro perspective here. What's your opinion on the current state of the market? I mean, it's complete chaos and pandemonium. You have these 2 narratives brawling in real time where it's like, is the 4-year cycle, is it a thing? And it's kinda backwards, right? You're having just nothing but amazing news flooding the market. You have mass adoption, you have stable coins, you have the Clarity Act. You have just so much amazing stuff going on, yet you're seeing a little bit of weakness in the market. How do you reconcile these 2 conflicting ideas?
Yeah, I always got honestly, I got that question a lot from even my friends, right? Like they ask about views on their investment, their portfolio, and then also obviously on as myself as a founder, then how do I view my business going forward? Like that's a lot of challenge, and that's what people thought. But long story short, here's my take, right? I still think it's positive in terms of I break down into two pieces, right? Like the whole macro space, especially I believe where we're at, like the US economic as of we're in today, it's going through traditionally a few months ago, maybe it's very booming, and there's a lot of uncertain because of politics and also because of like the economic growth, stagnation, etc. But now at least we're in a clarity where we know what the problem is. We want the government to back to work, to become like operating again, and then we're still trying to obviously driving the economic with the new technology infrastructure such as AI, digital infrastructure, etc., etc. So I'm trying to describe that overall, longer term or medium term, macro is still very positive. So I think stock market, every market, it will be coming back in terms of return to at least the Q1, Q2 state. But the industry I am in for crypto, this is more honestly complexity in terms of the like the OGs, what we call like the people that has been in the space for so long are still very confident, and we're still holding these assets as a concrete like asset that we own. But what's the noise, where the noise came from? Essentially, I think it's actually because there were so many new investors joining, and they're so new about crypto investment that they can't really, at least for now, they're educating themselves around what are the signals to catch, what are the information that are actually critical, and the cycle of what people thought as in crypto in the past are maybe shifting because of this bridging between traditional finance and crypto, which fundamentally I think to crypto it's a good thing because you still want the adoption, you want user to both use like services such as stablecoin, but we also obviously want these asset classes. Essentially, people begin to develop BTC and Ethereum from last like financial crisis, right? Like we think that's what becoming like a global assets that gives a bridge across geographic and countries, etc., etc. And I think now it's a critical stage that we're actually seeing that, which is a good sign, and that's why where these volatilities came from. Yeah.
Yeah, I completely agree, and, onto, like, whales, from some of those really early on investors who've been holding crypto for 10, 15 years, we have seen a tremendous amount of them start to sell some of their positions, and here's the thing, people consider that as something to be scared of. it's a good thing. These people took incredible risk very early on in crypto. I mean, people are scared to buy today after all the
Yeah,
adoption. Think of putting I
yeah,
granted much less, but people think of putting thousands and thousands of dollars on this really weird asset 15 years ago.
yeah,
They should be pulling profits. And you're also, there's a narrative floating around where it's the IPO of Bitcoin, where you're
mm,
seeing some of those venture capitalists, extremely early on investors starting to pull some of their profits. And then now
yeah,
you're seeing institutions take over, and now you're seeing it come into a different set of hands. It's honestly a super exciting time. But one thing the overall market doesn't like is uncertainty. And we're in uncharted waters for the most part. You have these three incredible narratives. You have AI, you have Web3 crypto, and you have even quantum computing.
mm,
And each of these industries in and of themselves were enough to tower and supersede the effects of something like the industrial revolution. So, there's a lot of speculation. Are we in a bubble? Are we not in a bubble? Is AI a bubble? But the truth is, uh, it's all noise, right? You know what you're holding on to. If you're here as a tourist for the ride, or you're a cliff dweller hoping to just catch a wave, yeah, it's going to be a sour time. But if you study the underlying assets, you know what you're investing in. Uh, this is just an amazing time to be alive, and it's nothing but opportunity. And
yes.
from what I'm seeing, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no worries. I was gonna agree. Yeah, I totally agree with what you mentioned, right? It's a
Yeah,
mindset, and it's about knowing your risk as well. Yeah, like knowing what you're walking into. Yeah,
there's never a good. It's always a scary time to buy Bitcoin, but you need to have the proper time horizon. And
yeah,
when you look back 3 4 years ago, whether you bought at the top or the bottom, it's all a great investment. So yeah, this is not financial advice and it's not investment advice, but for people who are willing to study the industry, and you have conviction in what you're going for. It's not that scary of a time. Now, you recently closed 11.5, from what I'm reading, an $11.5 million funding. You've raised $11.5 million. First of all, congrats. That's absolutely amazing. How do you feel about closing? Is this your first time closing anything this big? And how has that changed your mindset? Uh, Before we talk about the company, I want to talk about how that made you feel.
Yeah, honestly, it's excited. Obviously, right? Like anyone that you sort of like you mentioned, closing a deal, especially it's more like getting recognition by others, honestly, as people are operating in society. I think recognition across your industry, it's something I'm driven for, at least. So that's definitely very excited. At the very short moment, it gives me a hype, obviously, encouragement. But honestly, what comes after obviously is responsibilities, like you're handed from the investor of their trust and obviously their expectation for you to grow your tractions. um they push, obviously they help you, and they will nurture you, and but they will push you to reach the next milestone always. So yeah, I think it's excited plus responsibility about become a real like concrete cornerstone of this area, become a true builder. And I want to become a great founder just like other people, to help my company grow, to help my employee make them happy, and to also make people across the space, across the ecosystem, to benefit from what we're providing or our services, etc. Yeah.
So what's your short-term goal here for the company? And then if you can walk me through a slightly bigger picture of where you see this company in 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah. Short-term goal is really just delivering day to day our commitment or our promise to our like clients, our counterparties, what we're working on, right? Like we are a liquidity layer. So we do want to see the liquidity unified using our services. And also obviously we don't mind if there's other competitors. Actually, I honestly encourage that because the goal is to let the overall real world assets, which what we described earlier, like tokenized assets, the whole space to grow. And I think that's creating value to the society, honestly, in two ways, twofolds, right? Obviously, that creates new job and it creates new liberties about people to own these assets. But more importantly, it's still I feel it's honorable to helping people, not only institutions to make money, whereas where I came from, right? Like I used to work for hedge funds. We're making people jokes about that, like making, but it's making people like already rich become richer, literally, and they have access to exclusive asset classes that it hasn't been open to retail and public yet. But I think tokenization is one, if not the only way, to liberate that accessibilities and also distribution channels, not only to retail in the US, but literally it's to people in Latam and in Africa because of as long as they own stablecoin, it's very easy to onboard and own these asset classes. So yeah, there's two pieces that I want to see in short term. The macro level or the industry level, the space really take off, like real world assets, tokenization. People not only are curious about it, but people actually allocate some of their assets into it. And we also see the space, obviously, with more risk management and rudimentally research and builders building solid assets. Not it's like there were so many bad players, obviously, in any industry. So does crypto. So we want to see that gone. And that's why we're keeping doing the right thing. And certainly, obviously, on the company level, I think headcount growth and our business area, like the asset classes we cover, the services we provide, and the revenue keep growing. And last but not least, maybe we can at some point like take it to the public in terms of our own company, whether it's going to the traditional finance route or going through the cryptos listing process. I think it's all potential, but that also gives me another sort of pressure and but also honor to make the company brands more recognized, etc. Yeah.
Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. So Blockstreet just announced partnership with Falcon Finance and Stableblock. What do these partnerships mean in practice? And how do you see them shaping the ecosystem that you're currently working on?
Yeah. Yeah, Falcon Finance and Stable Stocks, they're both our I kind of know the team for a long time. They're great people. I think it means two things. One, it's like mentioned earlier, right? Like last question we sort of talked about, or long story short, we want to see the space with more people built. And we're building up this ecosystem bottom up in terms of we see it's more like in terms of the works people doing or the company's skills or the company's specific differentiations become more clear so that like our counterparty, for example, StableStock, they're I think one of the great issuers. So imagine them as of like comparing to traditional finance, they're like the bank that gives you or the initial contracts that they underwrite. And then later on, obviously they need banks or exchange to support that assets to be traded or to be accessed to publics. So we become their downstream. So Stablestock is our upstream to provide the issued inventories to us. And then we help to build infrastructure that allowed retail to trade, to leverage trade, to access to those. And then it also allowed institution to make money out of it in terms of like market making, obviously also trade, but in a larger scale and supporting the market. And down the string, like Falcon Finance, they are a stablecoin provider. So similar to Circle, which already take public, very recognized, but similarly, they're also I think by the asset they're held or by the size, they're already very large. So they're a very great stablecoin provider so that we can provide downstream users the actual connections about how do you purchase. For example, for people that owns like Falcon Finance stablecoin, the USDF, they can on the platform that we work with, they can trade at the USDF pairs to tokenized assets. So to summarize, right, like imagine the flow will be the user journey. Our issuer partnerships, they provide the tokenized Tesla or tokenized NVIDIA, XYZ, NVIDIA, etc. And then we are building the infrastructure that allows these assets to be on board to a DeFi or like decentralized finance platform where people are able to trade or leverage that. But in order for people to obviously buy these, just like in the real world, you own a fiat currency like US dollar. So similarly, Falcon Finance is that US dollar, but it's a stable coin on chain. So people own USDF, they can now enjoy utilities, like they can buy goods in terms of tokenized assets through us. So that creates a unique liquidity and utilizations for people that hold USDF to earn more, like to have a growth of their assets as well. Yeah.
That's so wild. I mean, just seeing traditional finance and knowing how the equity market it worked for so long, just listening to you talk, just it sounds surreal how this can be the future of just the equity market, which is absolutely amazing.
Yeah.
Um, when you first started Block Street, I'm curious how. I mean, it was the wild, wild west. It still kind of is, but without any sort of regulatory structures, how did you feel confident pursuing this? I mean, was this clear to you how this should be from the start?
I like the question. Because honestly, answer is intuition. I wouldn't call that magic intuition, but here's the fundamental or the very pure mindset, right? Like I think the society will eventually it has to deliver to people what they want. And by
Right,
that means, I know we're, going through the regulations, going through the compliance, SEC, all the stuff. But essentially, where crypto give people, it's like the beginning we discussed. It's like liberties or like freedoms to choose what you can own. And by all means, crypto or blockchain is the most efficient way to implement that. So
right,
in that logical thought process, so that's why we're very confident with what we're building because A, that's the best technology solution. So that's just a solution, blockchain. And B, it's what people should own, right? And we saw the trend. One example would be imagine like stock market. If we just look at Wall Street stock market, Wall Street also started with just paper trade, right? Like you trade on paper, you hand it to a broker, that broker input the paper or the contract you wrote down, and then they hand it back to you a paper contract. And then we evolved to electric trading, like those nerds programmers writes algorithms and trade, and that's a process. And thirdly, also obviously under regulations, we also have like parallel system to trade these tokenized or like not to sorry like stock market assets across different countries. They can still access the US stock market, but only to institutions. And until, for example, Robinhood, a fintech company, they liberate Byte. They allow margin accounts. They allowed very low like marginal ownership. So retail owns more like stocks now. I think that
yeah.
number was probably roughly around, at the beginning of COVID, it's probably under 10% of the entire trading volume. But obviously on some ticker, like some names, we remember the GameStop squeeze probably. So that's some sort of revolution, retail driving the narrative, retail driving the trading volume. And that's what people want because essentially people, I mean, there's some fundamental desire everyone has, obviously living safe and then obviously grow their wealth and living happily. So that's the fundamental philosophy of the society. So thinking backwards, it's just very logical and reasonable why this tokenized
Yeah.
assets will exist eventually. Yeah.
That's a very logical premise, and that gives you an advantage point where you know there's a certain force of human nature to head to something more
Exactly.
optimized, more efficient. And blockchain does nothing but cut out the middleman,
Yeah.
avoid just the needless chains of command to verify information. There's a certain level of integrity that's just super elegant. And to have that intuition to pursue it before there's a sense of clarity probably gave you some edge compared to your competitors who are waiting for clear regulation, for clear
Yeah.
structure before they move in. And that time difference can be all the difference, to be honest. So,
Yeah. Agree.
and yeah, and I kind of want to take a different angle here, but
Mhm.
we're talking about the stock market for a second. And it's just natural language processors like GPT are moving faster than anyone really predicted. I mean, I was just talking earlier with a futurist, and we're talking about the iPhone. The iPhone's been around for what, 17 years?
Mhm.
18 years, and to see the evolution of something that's digital and plays your music to like it doing literally everything, and by the way it plays your music in the span of such a short period of time,
Yeah.
uh, in reference to the scale of our human existence, I mean, we're talking a really narrow time frame, and that time frame is can become shorter and shorter and shorter with technological
Yeah.
advancements. This whole idea of Moore's law is really fleeting. It's and our predictive power is becoming just is fleeting as well. And stuff like AI being able to predict chaotic systems, something like the stock market, is going to become a tricky place, right?
Mhm.
So, how do you see this market playing out in 20 years from now? Like we're
Yeah.
talking like weeks. GPT has this advancements, but what if now this whole idea of getting an edge by having intuition or having, good charting and good experience in the market against an AI bot, which could greatly outpace. And first of all, the biggest flaw in the entire market is human emotion. That's what causes us to make
Yes,
90% of our mistakes.
yes.
And if if you can have these AI bots now that are extremely smart, I'm not talking today, I'm not talking tomorrow, I'm talking in 5, 10 years from now, are able to really, really pinpoint of like just high level probability where this market's going. And how do you see the stock market in 10 years from now? I mean, it's
Yeah, that's an amazing question. I mean, I thought about that a lot, even when I was in traditional finance. Like we discuss that all the time. I'm honestly very familiar with stock market trading process as well. Has been there, in the hedge fund work there. So I'll give you the quick answer. I think there is two fundamental change we will see in the future. My own opinion, but obviously, it's there's definitely more and more automatic trading process take place, which the result will be like probably like nowadays, you see the reaction of a signal very fast. What we call signal is basically like let's say earnings, right? Like literally today, if you think about Nvidia, like right, they released their earnings after I think 5 p.m. Immediately 3 minutes, you see the price up 10%. Who's driving that? It's not
Mhm,
retail, it's all automatic trading systems, which in the future it's going to be AI that's capturing even faster signals or even earlier
mhm,
on. So you see the what they call like realized fair market value, where priced in of these events ahead. Um, that's A. So it's gonna be like more volatilities in shorter period, obviously. Second point, it's like I also feel like we don't have to be because I have some friends that are very concerned that it's gonna take their job in terms of the financial analysts, portfolio managers. I think on some level, yes, some of the mediocres that are not able to find the true meaningful alpha, the true meaningful return, probably it's going to be easier to be replaced by AI to just benchmark the S&P 500. But I think human the mindset's still very beautiful in terms of sometimes like humans mindset is also very arbitrary, but they can think about something longer term. Because I think for AI, it's good at processing information, right? And process information usually means historical things, and then you use that to predict or to trade on short term. Like Nvidia earning is good, so the price is up. It's very easy logic. But if you want to
right.
think about longer term, investment wise, longer term reaction about the real demand, like predicting the demand, I've seen some great investor, like philosopher, they're kind of like Warren Buffett, for example, right? Like very admired investor. He see the cycle 10 years, I think. Like he has a very long-term planning towards it. And long story short, last but not least, I think AI is not gonna replace for the system architecture of that investment part as well. For example, how do you really allocate or design your portfolio, and how do you fundraise? For example, how do you design a structure? But that's all institutional mindset. On the personal level, like on retail, how do you really know your risk, and how do you really like think through um, to manage your portfolio versus your income. And that's something I think AI still can replace, and it still matters to everyone. You can't just hand it off to AI without knowing what you want and what you're walking into. Yeah.
Yeah, two things to that. First of all, we launched, talking 10 years back, if we were to talk about the first natural language processor, how do you anticipate it being played out? We would all probably agree that it would be put in this lab, in this sandbox environment with constraints, so it doesn't run amok and it doesn't get levers to places it shouldn't have levers to. And it's funny
Mhm.
how it all played out because, OpenAI just said, "Hey, here's our first version of GPT. We're throwing it into the wild. Have fun with it."
Yeah.
And it kind of excelled in areas that we never expected it to, stuff like music and
Mhm.
art. It's doing an exceptionally good job, and we thought that those were like some of those trademarks of what, humans excel at, the whole artistic creative thought process.
Yeah.
And I think where AI goes, to speak a little more broadly, is not necessarily due to technological constraints, but it comes to some fundamental philosophical questions like, consciousness. What is it? Is it emergent? Is it fundamental? And because we're still operating under the premise that, oh, AI can do analytical stuff, but there's something in here that's
Yeah.
intrinsically magical that AI can't model and replicate. But I
Yeah.
think when we start to understand some of those philosophical questions, what does it mean to be human? How does the brain work? We might realize it might not be that magical. And if it's not that magical, we can model it. And if we can model it, we can replicate it. And these things usually happen faster than people expect. So it's something that I do think about a lot. But to see
Mhm.
how this all plays out in the next 10 to 15 years is truly marvelous.
Yeah. If I can like really add on to your comments, right? I am a very technical person, and I think people said honestly, long story short, I think my first interaction with AI was 2017. I was an exchange student at UCLA. I studied artificial intelligence, which is a PhD level course. At the back then I already know I think we're gonna reach there because I see AI or the AI we call nowadays, what machine learning, whatever, we can get there as long as two criteria it's satisfied, or three, I guess. You're right. Like there's few constraints. A, it's data, still very important. But I think that's also why blockchain is important. I'm not really talking about blockchain because I'm like working in the space, but honestly, blockchain is also a data architecture, like a storage system, a system that you can store a lot of the information in the way people want and customize it and become readable, so machine readable. Because if you want to train the models, obviously you have to have machine readable and AI readable data points. And blockchain can help that, and other data architecture that we're improving can help that. So data is the key, honestly. And then you have to have some sort of measurement of what you want to achieve. So important concept about AI, obviously, it's the benchmark. So if you know what you want to deliver, if you can describe it, then it's actually easier. So you can obviously always optimize around it. You can keep improving as long as you can define the formula or the XYZ you want to achieve. For example, we want a faster reaction of predict the stock market perhaps, or NLP, you probably want a benchmark that can write to you or translate to you better with a higher accuracy. If you can describe it, then highly likely scientists can model it and improve it. And third but not least, obviously the physical computational constraint as we're seeing now. That's why Nvidia stock goes so high, right? Like the market cap, because people are anticipating we are using heavy like computing computational power to train the model. So the physical constraint is still there. We're improving by so many ways. Maybe other like GPUs in the future or quantum computing. That's where it comes to become very important because the obviously those constraints are also a gap or a criteria for we to reach what we saw in the crazy or the beautiful movies that AI where robots, humanoids can become very similar to human in maybe a few more years from now, where we can improve humans' life by I think there's crazy idea of living afterwards and how do you store your memory, upload, etc. I'm a big fan of those movie, by the way. I'm very like yeah, I
Yeah.
like all the scientists of science fictions. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. So, I mean, the whole idea of living longer, I think that that's going to be a conversation that's going to take the forefront of discourse in society because we've evolved to see the silver lining in death, to see beauty in our limited time on this earth. It gives value to everything we do. We appreciate the time we spend with our parents because we know that one day life will take them away from us.
yeah.
We're careful which partner we choose because we only have a small amount of time. If we lived forever, nothing would see value anymore. And that really is harping on a silver lining. That is a
Yep,
coping mechanism that we've evolved to deal with the fact that, no
yep.
one has ever escaped death. And
Mhm,
we find other ways to deal with it. We can talk about Albert Einstein all the time, but we have no idea who Albert Einstein's neighbor was. Why is that? Because Albert Einstein did something in his life so he can live in the mind of everyone else. That's why we talk
mhm.
about him. It's why we have such a pull towards having kids, because that's one of our limited ways to live on forever by passing on
Yeah,
our genes.
interesting.
I think
Yes.
that is becoming. Yeah, I think that we're sucked into that mindset because we've evolved to think that way. But we really should be saying this is like, how do we live longer? We can control life. Life shouldn't be this one directional process that you go from A and then you end off in B, and life is a state function. Doesn't matter what you do, you end off there anyways. But and also the concept of life, like we have this intrinsic benevolence, a goodness towards technology, blockchain,
Yeah.
AI, all of it. Now, we understand that we are essentially and very possibly creating our own irrelevance. That
Mhm.
perhaps the benchmark for human intelligence is something that technology is going to blow right through. And the only question we ask is, how do we make this iPhone faster sooner? It's like we're collectively designed to pass this perhaps abstract form of life, this baton of life from biology to technology. So,
Mhm.
you know, it's fascinating because it looks scary. It looks harmful to see robots at Boston Dynamics do backflips, and to see how fast this is all moving, and to see we're looking directly at a threat, but we're just trying to get there as quickly as possible. I mean, have you ever thought about this stuff? And from a really bigger perspective, do you have a dystopian
Mhm.
view, or are you an optimist?
I thought about this like ever since I growing up, to be honest. I don't know why. Like I always curious about those ultimate questions, what they call like where people goes in the future. I feel like, you know, I think I truly believe like in the future we will become in terms of unify. I mean, this is probably out of our discussion today, but people can be really connected telepathically, and then there's so many things we didn't know, right? Like there was something like I remember I ever since I growing up at the back of my mind, it's like as long as we can measure it, as long as we can observe, we will ultimately research and figure out, and it become a science rules philosophy, and it drives the next thing we develop. So back to what we described, as long as we can observe or research what is death, what's the elephant in the room, what is birth, giving birth, what's gene, what's the element in the universe, and ultimately if we can figure it out, we can observe, then we will have so many much more powerful tools to become what we just go through, right? Like maybe we can extend our life in so many ways, maybe the physical body or maybe transfer to another ones. I've seen so many
Yeah,
movies, and I've seen not only movies, I can describe like I probably signed some NDAs in the past, non-disclosure, but on a high level, right? Like I've went into labs, like physical labs, my own myself. I've seen really like crazy ideas and in the progress like already implemented on, let's say, mouse, where the testing animals. But if that's going to happen on human, I think it's going to fundamentally change so many things. Yeah, I've seen
yeah.
the labs version, and I think
It.
like 10 years from now it's becoming true. Yeah, yeah.
I wonder if the best direction is to optimize our biology, or to look at it as the biggest bottleneck to living on. Think of us as biological systems. We operate on base 4 with our 4 nucleotides, and
Hmm.
we're a base 4 system. We're essentially a base 4 computer. And then we
Hmm.
said, hey, we came up with the computer, and this is the base 2 system. We decided to like tinker it, but it's all inspired from our biology, right? The input output peripherals. You have your speaker, you have your CPU, it mimics the brain, mimics the microphone mimics the ears. And and now you're seeing this like weird symbiotic relationship where now we're looking at technology, which we've inspired, and now we're saying, hey, why don't we behave more like that? Like maybe the most important things about ourselves, our face, our features, the characteristics that we use to attribute our unique self to, are perhaps the biggest limiting constraints, right? Perhaps this biological system is not an ideal system to survive. It is the
Yeah.
least ideal system dictated by evolution. Perhaps
Yeah.
what you're describing is this is where we're going. This is what
Oh,
blockchain is all
exactly.
about. This is what you said. It's not connected. I think it's heavily
Oh,
connected.
of
I think
course.
it's super
Exactly.
connected. And and
Yeah.
perhaps cyborgism is the way to go. Instead of worrying about this heart and doing open heart surgery and keeping it going for as long as possible, maybe we don't need this. Maybe we should replace it with an electronic heart that's fault tolerant, that can work for 1,000 years. So it's
Exactly.
all super fascinating. The question becomes, do we want to optimize this, or do we want to take what's uniquely us? And that's the secret. What is uniquely us? Is it our genetics with our experience? Is this brain really magical? Is it perhaps taking our consciousness, whatever consciousness is, and traversing it onto an electronic system?
Yeah.
And these things sound like science fiction, but I think there are conversations for tomorrow. I think that now that we're able to control, I think longevity is going to become one of the most like the most focused on fields in science, in biology, is how do we live longer?
Mhm.
Ultimately, that should be the goal for everyone.
live longer, happier, and then live the way we want, or even, pick and choose. There's so many genetic editing technology nowadays as well. Even though it's
Yeah.
not legal, obviously, but some places it's not legal. But I would say like
What, you talking about
people,
CRISPR?
yeah, CRISPR, or even there's something new came out. I'm not the expert, but I feel like even though it's not, allowed, but there's definitely people taking the risk to extend
Right.
the research. That's how we want to put it,
If
right? Like,
if it's
yeah,
there, it's gonna be used, and this is where, like, countries that don't have regulations almost have
yeah,
this weird advantage over us, where we have these rules that not everyone has to play by, right? And then people can technically cheat if we're calling this a game. Yeah, it's all fascinating stuff. And,
yeah.
we say happier and healthier lives. Like, where AI is taking us, where everything is going to be like, right now, we're able to talk about, hey, you have a uniqueness factor. What makes you unique? Double down on that. Whatever you can patternize, delegate to a computer system, to AI. But eventually, anyone above a B+ student is going to have that advantage where they're not directly threatened. They're above the line of like where AI is going to threaten your job position. How long is that going to last for? I mean, we're talking maybe 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. Where does happiness come from when no one has to work? I know that's a weird question, but like,
I think, well, working, it's not something drives you. Or even for myself, I like working, but beyond that, it's not because the work itself. I guess it's because the learning, the rewards, right? Like
yeah,
fundamentally, always want rewards. That's how we were encouraged to grow up. So working gives you the rewards. For example, for everyone that goes to a 9 to 5 job, it gives you the money. Honestly, that keeps you on living, keeps give you money to buy things, and that's where the happiness came from. And also, if people really enjoy the work they're working on, that means they enjoy learning and also building stuff that they want to see it happens, but not the work itself. I guess my point is back to the AI conversation, like I think in the future, if we don't have to work hard to get those rewards, like we can actually learn things without having the pressure of is this gonna give me money or something. It may be become like even better, right? Like it's not about working itself. It's always about the rewards you get from it. If you want learning, if you want to just build a product without worrying the revenue, and AI is going to do the work, and there's people talking about universal basic income, like people, government's going to pay you, which I don't think that's too crazy. If we have like AI or robots working for us, then as human, we probably have some privilege over, we still have a government to work so that we still have income, but we can actually, skip the working part, but get to the rewards, like happiness in terms of you can still have your families, time to study, time to build the things you truly want to build, or you know just enjoy, or is just travel around the world, just enjoy it. Yeah, yeah,
Heidi, I have a question for you.
yeah,
Hypothetical. I'm a
of course.
student studying economics at Harvard University. I just graduated. I'm hungry and I see the world ahead of me.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, hey, this Web3 world looks really good. What would be the number one piece of advice you'd give to me?
Find the best mentor, like matured, experienced mentored, and then talk to them. I think that's just any industry, honestly. I think talk to people that had experience as much as possible, like not only just one person. You try to do that because in that there was two things, right? Like A, you have to do the network that already keeps you into the space, or like help you to get into the space when you're starting to network or reaching out for help, finding resource, read about stuff, and secondly, when you actually hear about people's experience, what they did, and whether they're happy as well, that's also gonna makes you, or helps you to think about, do I want to really commit to it? Like I still can give you the story, right? Like you asked me at the beginning, but long story short, I really was driven or drive into, because when I starting to network with people that work in crypto, in Web3, whatever we call it, they're happy. Like versus when I talk to other people, they only talks about, complaints sometimes. They don't talks about the happiness they enjoyed or the crazy stuff they went through. So it's really about the personality that works in the industry. And also obviously they're happy about that, the feedbacks that makes me honestly jealous. Like FOMO, fear of missing out. So it drives me to do my own research, and there you go. So I starting, and luckily, I studied a little bit technical things. Like I'm on the computer science computational background, so I also understand the blockchain things, and I know this technology. It's very important. It's very useful. So that's why I
Hmm.
fundamentally feel like If not now, then when to jump, to really lean
Yeah.
in towards it. Yeah.
If not now, then when? That is a beautiful saying in Jewish philosophy. And what I
Mhm.
notice is people like yourself, the smartest people in the room, always answer that question with humility. They always acknowledge that there's always someone smarter they can learn from.
Yeah.
And a smart person is someone who sees a way to learn from everyone. And it's
Yeah.
I think that your answer was an absolutely beautiful answer. I have one more I have one more question for you. If you were to go back in time
Yeah.
and change one thing, what was like the biggest mistake you made that hurt you the most and that caused you a lot of damage and grief and stress? And I want to like, and what have you learned from that?
Mhm. Wow, that might be. I mean, honestly, people all make mistakes, right? I think when I'm but I think before that, right? Like I want to give not a great advice, but I think my experience is about making decision is very important. That's why my personality is whenever I make a major decision, like change about something like I knew is going to change my life, I would usually be patient and not to rush about it. But long story short, I think one of advice I would give or mistake I would avoid if I can go back is I think when I was way younger, I should have just be more bold in terms of exploring more. Because growing up, I starting to have my own conscious probably just beginning from high school. But I feel like as a kid, I should actually take more advantage. Like even in primary school or middle school, if we read about the greatest entrepreneur startup, if that's your role model, then they really starting to go from the scratch and they don't necessarily following what every other kids are doing. They're happy with themselves. Like being nerd or being weird. They're not like too afraid of fitting in. And I think that's something I would have drive more because I remember like literally remember my memory of always debating between do I want to seems like a good student or do I want to actually do something I truly want, where like become like even no one agrees with me, even maybe my parents don't agree with me, maybe I should just pursue it because maybe that's my real talents and I shouldn't be just following everyone else and doing the exams and those stuff, right? Like following the general the general path. Yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes great answer. And sometimes our parents want the best for us, but sometimes they follow the rules that worked for them at their time. And if you see life differently, the best way to make your case is to show them that you'll find success off a different path. And that can be a
Right.
struggle people are sometimes willing to take because what works today might have been a horrible deal yet a horrible idea yesterday.
Yeah.
Heidi, how
So
could people
and
get in
also
touch with you? Yeah,
oh
sorry, go
sorry,
ahead.
sorry. Actually, I like the last question because now that I think about it, maybe it's something that can lighten up the mood as well. It's about I think another advice working with the right people or being with the right people. That can be so many ways, right? Our parents obviously we love them, we can't choose, but who you're working with, your partners, your loved ones, like your relationship, your friends group, choose that wisely. Like really choose people that are
Yeah,
nice around you. I've made the mistake choosing the wrong people. So that's the other thing I would honestly give the advice. Like being smart in terms of
yeah,
people around you, because we are society animals. We always, if we don't want, even if we don't want it, but you are pretty much the average of the people around it. That's the truth.
yeah,
So if you
yeah,
want to
yeah,
become, the other version of you, then choose people that they are the version. So you can become automatically going towards it. Yeah.
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 Wise
Yeah. Okay.
words. And
So,
to add to that, I think we're defined by our weakest component. You can have a
mm,
company, you can have a startup with
mhm,
incredibly brilliant people, with the top minds in the world, but if they don't know how to get along, if they
yeah.
don't know how to keep each other happy and motivated and fulfilled, they likely will lose to someone who's perhaps a lot less intelligent, but
Yeah.
can do the basics, and they'll eventually kind of get through the storms and get through the hard times. And yeah, I mean, what's the point of being smart and having these awesome ideas if you've got stress in your personal life, or you don't take care of your body, or you don't
Mhm,
feel motivated, or or you're not healthy? We are truly defined by our weakest component. Yes,
yeah.
Heidi, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, follow me on my Twitter. I'm very active on Twitter these days. Yeah,
Okay,
so yeah, my Twitter where I don't know, write me an email. I always reply to email very quick.
what's your
Yeah.
Twitter handle?
Twitter handle is Hedy Hedy W. My last name, the first spelling Wang. Yep,
Mm,
is Hedy Wang. So
perfect.
mhm,
Heidi, thank you so
awesome.
much for sharing your time, your brilliance, your wisdom, and it sounds like you're doing incredibly amazing things. So I wish you nothing but success. And I hope you watch this in 5, 10 years from
Oh,
now
of course.
and
Yeah.
you chuckle because, you know, where you thought you would be is nowhere near to where you actually are. So that's my blessing to you and thank you for your
Really,
time.
I like all the questions you asked, to be honest, Michael, and thank you for your time. And I feel like we will check in at some point and see if what we talked about today are becoming
Yeah.
real.